Emperor Hirohito, also known as Emperor Shōwa, reigned over Japan from 1926 until his death in 1989. His life spanned some of the most turbulent events of the 20th century, and his reign encompassed Japan's rise as an imperial power, its devastating defeat in World War II, and its remarkable transformation into a modern democracy. To understand the atrocities committed by Japan during the war, one must first examine Hirohito's role in shaping, permitting, or acquiescing to the decisions that guided the country into conflict. Hirohito inherited a throne with immense symbolic authority. The emperor was regarded as a divine figure, descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu, and the Japanese political system reinforced this sacred image. At the same time, Japan was undergoing rapid modernization and militarization. The armed forces enjoyed enormous influence in government, and ultra-nationalist ideas were steadily gaining ground. Against this backdrop, Hirohito stepped into a role that combined spiritual reverence with political responsibility. The 1931 Manchurian incident marked the first turning point of his reign. Elements of the Japanese military staged a false flag attack on a railway in Manchuria and used it as a pretext to occupy the region. Although civilian leaders in Tokyo hesitated, the military acted decisively, and Hirohito ultimately sanctioned the takeover. Japan's withdrawal from the League of Nations in 1933, after being condemned for this aggression, further demonstrated the emperor's alignment with militarist expansion. This moment revealed a pattern. While Hirohito sometimes expressed concern about reckless military moves, he rarely exercised his power to halt them. The February 26th incident of 1936 provided another window into his role. Radical young army officers attempted a coup, assassinating key government officials and occupying parts of Tokyo. Hirohito was furious, reportedly demanding that the revolt be crushed immediately. His firm stance helped restore order, but it also underscored a contradiction. He was capable of decisive intervention when his own authority was threatened, yet more hesitant when faced with broader questions of war and peace. By the late 1930s, Japan was fully committed to expansion on the Asian continent. The Second Sino-Japanese War brought horrific atrocities, most infamously the Nanjing Massacre of 1937, in which hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians were murdered and tens of thousands of women raped by Japanese soldiers. Whether Hirohito directly ordered such acts remains debated, but it is clear that he received detailed reports of the military campaign and raised no objection strong enough to alter its course. His silence, combined with his symbolic status as commander-in-chief, lent legitimacy to the army's actions. The most dramatic escalation came in 1941 with the attack on Pearl Harbor. This surprise strike brought the United States into the war and set Japan on a path toward eventual defeat. Documents suggest that Hirohito was aware of the plan and did not oppose it, even as he expressed unease about provoking a powerful adversary. His assent was critical, since Japan's leaders justified their actions in the name of the emperor. To the Japanese public, the war was fought as a sacred mission under his divine authority. Throughout the conflict, Hirohito played an ambiguous but undeniable role. He was not a mere figurehead, as some later claimed, but neither was he a dictator in the style of Hitler or Mussolini. Instead, he operated within a system where the military wielded enormous influence, yet his approval remained indispensable. Historians remain divided on the extent of his responsibility. Some argue he was a cautious monarch swept along by forces beyond his control. Others maintain he was a willing accomplice who sanctioned and sustained the war effort. The consequences of his reign were catastrophic. Millions of soldiers and civilians across Asia perished in battles, bombings, forced labor camps, and massacres committed by Japanese forces. In Japan itself, the final months of the war brought unimaginable devastation. The firebombing of Tokyo in March 1945 killed over 100,000 people in a single night. Then, in August, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki obliterated two cities and forced Japan to confront surrender. Hirohito's role in ending the war stands in stark contrast to his earlier silence. On August 15, 1945, he delivered a radio broadcast, the first time the Japanese people had ever heard his voice announcing Japan's surrender. He framed the decision not as a repudiation of the war, but as a necessity to endure the unendurable after the atomic bombings. The speech preserved the monarchy while shifting responsibility away from himself. After the war, the United States faced a dilemma: prosecute Hirohito as a war criminal, or preserve him as a stabilizing figure during the occupation. General Douglas MacArthur chose the latter. By portraying the emperor as a passive constitutional monarch manipulated by militarists, the Allies avoided potential unrest in Japan. Hirohito was never tried, and he retained the throne, though stripped of his divine status. The post-war years reshaped Hirohito's image. He became a symbol of continuity in a country undergoing democratic reforms and economic recovery. His long reign gave Japan stability, but the shadow of his wartime role lingered. For victims of Japanese aggression in China, Korea, and Southeast Asia, his survival without accountability was a bitter reminder of unaddressed injustice. The debate over Hirohito's responsibility continues to this day. Supporters argue that he lacked the power to resist militarist elites, and that blaming him oversimplifies the complex dynamics of wartime Japan. Critics counter that his symbolic authority was precisely what legitimized the war, and that his failure to oppose atrocities implicates him in the suffering they caused. Hirohito's story illustrates the dangers of unchecked authority wrapped in divine symbolism. It also highlights how history is shaped not only by what leaders do, but by what they choose not to do. His reign stands as a reminder of the profound human cost when caution, silence, or complicity allow extremism and militarism to flourish. In the end, Hirohito remained on the throne until 1989, dying as a respected elder statesman in Japan, but remembered elsewhere as the monarch who presided over aggression, conquest, and atrocity. His legacy is a paradox: a man who guided his country into catastrophe yet escaped judgment, who symbolized both devastation and recovery, and whose reign still provokes debate about power, responsibility, and the moral burden of leadership.